Here's a fact that stops people cold. Study after study using DNA testing has found that a surprising amount of fish sold as one thing is actually something else. Seafood is one of the most mislabeled foods in the entire market, and salmon sits right at the center of it. So when you pay the higher price for wild-caught salmon, are you actually getting wild salmon? Sometimes yes. Sometimes, according to the testing, no. Today we're going to unpack how this happens and how you can protect yourself. Quick honest disclaimer. Everything here is based on publicly available research, seafood labeling rules, and my own opinion as someone who reads labels for a living. I'm not accusing any single company of fraud. I'm showing you how the system works and where it leaks. Stick around. Let's start with the core difference, because it's bigger than most people realize. Wild salmon is caught in the ocean or rivers, eating its natural diet, swimming its whole life. Farmed salmon is raised in net pens, fed a manufactured feed, in dense enclosures. These are genuinely different products, with different diets, different fat content, different texture, and a very different price. Wild salmon is generally more expensive because catching it is harder, and the supply is limited to seasons and quotas. Farmed salmon is produced year-round at scale, which is why it's cheaper and always available. That price gap is exactly what creates the temptation to sell the cheap one as the expensive one. Now here's the single most useful thing I can teach you in this whole video, and it's about color. Wild salmon gets its pink to red color naturally, from the crustaceans and other creatures it eats in the ocean. Farmed salmon, on its manufactured feed, would otherwise turn out a grayish color that no one wants to buy. So color is added to the feed to make farmed salmon that appealing pink-orange. That's not a conspiracy, it's standard practice and it's disclosed in the industry. But it means the beautiful color of a farmed fillet is, in a real sense, added. And once you know that, the fish itself starts giving away clues, which we'll get to. Let me walk you through the label patterns that aren't what they appear to be. Patterns, not specific brands, because the pattern is what you carry to the store. Pattern 1. Atlantic salmon is essentially always farmed. This is the most important single fact in the video. Wild Atlantic salmon populations are so depleted that commercial fishing of them is largely restricted. So the Atlantic salmon you see in the case, as a practical matter, is farmed salmon, even when nothing on the label says farmed. The name refers to the species, and that species is farmed. If you want wild, Atlantic salmon is not it. The wild varieties have different names, which I'll cover in the real section. Pattern 2. Fresh salmon, standing in for wild. The word fresh refers to whether it's been frozen, not to whether it's wild or farmed. A fresh Atlantic salmon is fresh farmed salmon. Fresh and wild are completely different claims that people constantly blur together. Pattern 3. The vague wild with no species and no origin. Real wild salmon is usually specific. It names the species and often the region it came from. A bare wild claim with no species name and no origin is weaker and harder to verify. Specificity is a sign of a real supply chain. Vagueness is a place for problems to hide. Pattern 4. The restaurant and counter switch. A lot of the mislabeling the DNA studies find happens not in sealed packages but at counters and restaurants, where the fish is unlabeled on your plate and you're trusting a menu word. Wild salmon on a menu, out of season, at a low price, is exactly the situation the testing flags most often. Pattern 5. Out of season fresh wild. Wild salmon has seasons. It's caught mostly in the warmer months. If you see fresh wild salmon in the dead of winter at a normal price, be skeptical, because genuine fresh wild salmon is a seasonal, limited thing. Often what's honest in winter is previously frozen wild salmon, which is actually fine and often better quality, because it's frozen at peak. Pattern 6. Color used to imply wild. Because people have learned that deep red can signal wild, a deeply colored farmed fillet, colored by feed, can create that impression. Color is a hint, not proof, precisely because it can be added. Pattern 7. Ocean-raised and similar soft phrases. Ocean-raised sounds wild and free, but raising is farming. Net pens in the ocean are still farms. Watch for words that borrow the imagery of wild without making the claim. Pattern 8. The too good price. Wild salmon cost more to bring to market. A wild salmon priced down near farmed prices is a flag. The economics of real wild salmon don't usually allow for a bargain. Pattern 9. The uniform, evenly marbled fillet. This ties back to the fish itself. Farmed salmon tends to be fattier, with wide, even white fat stripes running through it, and a paler, uniform pink from the added color. Wild salmon tends to be leaner, firmer, with thinner fat lines and a deeper, more variable natural red. A very fatty, evenly striped, uniformly pale pink fillet claiming to be wild is worth a hard second look. Let me give you 2 more tells you can use with your own eyes and in your own kitchen, because the fish keeps talking if you know how to listen. First, the shape of the fillet. Wild salmon fillets are often thinner and more tapered, because wild fish are leaner and more athletic, while farmed fillets are frequently thick and uniform because the fish were fattened in pens. Second, watch what happens when you cook it. Farmed salmon, being fattier, often releases more of that white stuff. It's a protein called albumin and can cook up softer and oilier. Wild salmon is leaner, firmer, and cooks faster, so it's actually easy to overcook. It wants a gentler hand. None of these is a courtroom proof by itself, but stack them together: species name, price, season, color, fat striping, fillet shape, how it cooks, and you can read a salmon like a page. And let me handle the nutrition question honestly, because both sides oversell their case. Wild salmon is generally leaner and eats a natural diet, and many people prefer it for that. Farmed salmon is often higher in total fat, which means it can actually carry a lot of omega-3s too, though the fat profile differs. There are ongoing discussions about what farmed fish are fed and about contaminants, with farming practices improving over time. I'm not going to hand you a scare story in either direction, because the honest picture is nuanced. Both are nutritious foods. The reason to insist on real wild when you pay for wild isn't that farmed will hurt you, it's simply that you should get the distinct product you chose and paid extra for. Now the red flags in plain form. Red flag 1. The word Atlantic, treated as farmed regardless of other words. Red flag 2. Wild, with no species name and no region of origin. Red flag 3. Fresh wild, out of season, at a suspiciously normal or low price. Red flag 4. Soft imagery words like ocean raised that imply wild without saying it. Red flag 5. A wide white striped, fatty, uniformly pale fillet claiming to be wild. Let me be genuinely fair here, because farmed salmon gets a lot of hate and not all of it is deserved. Farmed salmon is not poison. It's an affordable, widely available source of protein and omega-3s, and responsible aquaculture has improved a lot. If you buy farmed salmon knowingly and it fits your budget, that's a perfectly reasonable choice, and you should enjoy it. This video isn't about fear of farmed fish. It's about honesty. If you are specifically paying the wild premium, you should actually be getting wild fish, not farmed fish wearing a wild price tag. So here are the 4 ways to actually get the real thing. Real 1. Buy salmon by its specific wild species name. Wild Pacific salmon comes under names like sockeye, coho, king or chinook, pink, and chum. When the label names one of these specific wild species, you're on much firmer ground than with a vague wild. Sockeye in particular has a naturally deep red color and is almost always wild, which makes it one of the safer choices. Learn those species names and you've got a real key. Real 2. Buy salmon with a genuine third-party sustainability or origin certification. There are independent seafood certification programs that verify the source. A real certification seal, not a marketing graphic, means someone outside the seller checked the supply chain. That verification is exactly what a vague, wild claim lacks. Real 3. Buy frozen wild salmon and stop fearing the word frozen. Wild salmon is often frozen right after being caught, at peak quality. Previously frozen wild sockeye can be more genuinely wild and better, than a questionable fresh fillet of unknown origin. Frozen is a feature here, not a flaw. It's how real wild salmon travels honestly out of season. Rule 4. Buy from a trusted fishmonger or source who can tell you the species and origin. A good fish counter, a reputable brand that names species and region, or a direct source can answer the two questions that matter: what species and where from. When someone can answer those plainly, you're almost certainly getting what you paid for. Here's your seafood case routine. First, remember Atlantic means farmed as a practical rule. Second, look for specific wild species names: sockeye, coho, king, pink, chum. Third, don't fear frozen and be skeptical of fresh wild out of season. Fourth, look for a real certification or a source that names species and origin. Do those, and you've beaten most of the mislabeling risk without needing a DNA lab in your pocket. And the mindset to leave with: none of this is a cartoon villain. It exists because wild salmon sells for much more than farmed. The two can look nearly identical on a plate. Farmed color is added to close the visual gap, and a lot of seafood passes through long, murky supply chains where a label can quietly change. The incentive is to sell the cheap fish at the expensive fish's price, and the opportunity is everywhere the chain is vague. But you're not shopping on a single word anymore. You're asking two specific questions: what species and where from? And those two questions are a test that farmed fish in disguise almost never passes. If this changed how you'll look at the fish counter, hit subscribe, because on this channel we keep pulling the thread until the whole system is visible. Next time someone says wild salmon, you'll know exactly what to ask. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.